I will tell you the truth as I lived it. Not the softened truth people carry like a calabash on their heads, so it doesn't spill, but the kind that splashes everywhere and stains your wrapper. My name is Chin, last child of 8. The one my mother hoped would be a son, after 7 daughters had braided her hopes into a long rope. The night I came, the midwife's hands froze, then trembled. I did not know it then, of course, but I have been taught the sound of that tremble, how it beats against a room like a trapped moth, how it rearranges the air, how it could turn joy into a question. Chin, my mother would whisper later, they washed you, and the water knew a secret before any of us had words. I was born carrying 2 maps on one small body, 2 directions carved into one soft geography. The midwife looked at my father looked at my mother, and the lantern flame looked at nobody. In that room, with palm oil scent clinging to the walls, and the moon watching from a gap in the zinc, my father closed the door on the world and opened his mouth to avow, no one must hear. We will call the child by the name God gave. I grew in a house that stirred at 4 a.m., mortar and pestle like a heartbeat, goats complaining under the mango tree, my sisters tying their wrappers with the easy grace of girls who learned womanhood from water. Me, I learned quiet. My father said, wear trousers, and I wore them. My mother said, stay close, and I stayed so close to her that her sweat became the weather I knew. They cut my fingernails short, taught me to sit with knees apart, taught me to laugh from the chest. Yet the mirror, that stubborn truth-teller, kept whispering what my body insisted on becoming. Softness at the hips, a slow swell above the ribs, a tenderness in my walk. By 9, the mirror and my aunt's eyes had formed an alliance, and my aunt, Auntie Doa, who cooked like a drummer plays, came to take me away. Obodu welcomed me with dust that glowed like gold when the sun was low. Auntie Doa put me in a small room where the window opened to the compound, where children ran after the evening, and she gave me a basin, a comb, and a new way to be. Sit like this, she'd say, pressing a finger to the inside of my knee. Walk like this. Laugh from here. Talk from here. When I bathed, I learned to let water pass like a prayer over a shrine. Respectfully, swiftly, eyes lowered. The first time I asked her, voice small enough to hide in my own throat, Auntie, if I am not a boy, why does my body carry a boy's thing? She did not flinch. Her answer was a woven basket without loose ends. You're a girl, my child, a very rare girl. You will protect yourself with silence and wisdom. You do not owe the world your body to examine. You owe yourself a life. I held that sentence in my mouth like cola nut, bitter at first, then numbing, then strangely sweet. Each day she added little stitches to my becoming. How to tie a scarf, how to say no without saying no, how to answer questions with a smile that is also a boundary. I became beautiful in the way trouble is beautiful to a bored town. The market learned my face. Men learned my shadow. They came with sugar in their tongues, and I learned early that sugar is a poor meal. I said no so often that no turned into a home, a hut with a mat, a river you can sleep beside. Some men went away quietly, some with laughter that burned like pepper in my ears. But one man came with a patience that frightened me. A man, he smelled of soap and work. His shirts had that soft crispness of a man who knows his size and buys it twice. He owned shops in 3 towns, and a smile he polished daily. Chin, he would say, good afternoon, and I would subtract myself from the road. When I refused him, he simply stepped aside and waited for the road to return me. He went to my aunt with groceries and words like, my intentions are good. I heard the conversation through the wall, the soft rumble of my aunt's voice, the sincerity in his. Later, my aunt wrapped me in her wrapper and said, you cannot outrun your whole life. When I agreed to friendship, I did it like someone stepping into a river with clothes on. careful, unready to surrender. Aman was kind in the way men are kind when they have never carried a secret for more than an afternoon. He brought me oranges, and I peeled them into moons and half moons. While listening to him speak of expansion, of owning another shop, of owning our future, I tested him the way you test a bridge before you cross with a load. What if, I asked one evening, the harmattan wind sanding our skins to softness? What if marriage brings empty arms? What if my body refuses to be a bowl? He laughed at fate. We will stand, he said. We will stand, even if we lean. I asked, what if I carry a secret a wife should never need to explain to her husband? He squeezed my hand and said, then I will hold the secret like my own name. My aunt watched his promises with the eyes of a woman who knows that men promise with their mouths and undo with their silence. But she said, if you choose him with both eyes open. The day of our wedding, the son wore a head tie. My mother came from Ikuru with a basket full of blessings and a mouthful of warnings. Eat before you get hungry. Speak before you are spoken for. My father stood under the orange tree and refused to meet my eyes, as if my eyes were the truth, and the truth was a house on fire. Music braided the air. Women's ululations cut the sky into bright strips. Children chased each other between legs and plastic chairs. We did our vows in a compound far from my childhood, because the past is a neighbor who knows how to arrive without knocking. I smiled and smiled until my cheeks ached, and my aunt touched my elbow, just once, like a reminder that evening always comes. Night is a mirror that says, bring your true face. I bathed, I prayed, I folded myself into a towel and another prayer. Turn off the light, I whispered, and Aman did, laughing softly at my shyness. In the darkness, our bodies searched for each other like long-lost siblings. When his hand found what it should not have found, the dark changed its weight. I felt him go still, a stillness that had shoulders, eyes, teeth. He left the bed without words. The bulb stuttered on. He had switched it on. And then the world narrowed to the look on his face. It was the look you give to a goat that enters the kitchen and learns your name. What is this? He asked, voice climbing a ladder it had never climbed before. He looked at my body like it had cheated at an exam. Who are you? His feet retreated, then advanced. The room was too small for his confusion. Speak now, he ordered, and my words came out in handfuls, clumsy, wet. I was born this way. I am not a man. I am your wife. I did not choose this body. It chose me and refused to let go. He laughed, but the laugh had acid. You tricked me, he said. You counted my steps and hid your shadow. He called it an abomination. He called me a mistake. He called the night a trap. When a man leaves a room full of your fear, he takes the oxygen and the future. I stayed on the bed until the sheet cooled under me, until the bulb turned into a small sun, and my eyes learned to hurt without tears. At first light, I walked back through streets that had danced for me the day before. My feet, dusty and bare, learned the old road to my aunt's house without asking my head for directions. My father was chewing his morning stick and swallowed his anger with the bitter foam. My mother took my face in her hands like a gourd that had cracked, and she refused to admit it. My aunt pulled me inside and closed the door with a sound that said, "Let the town knock. We will open when we wish." I slept like a person who has fought fire with her hands. By evening they had decided. Ikuru would take me back. Distance is a kind of forgiveness. We left when the road had finished gossiping, and the moon had climbed into her night shift. My mother's lap became my pillow. My father's silence became our luggage. My aunt's prayers stitched the bus seats together. When we reached, the dawn felt like water poured down the back at the village stream. Shocking, cleansing, not asking permission. No one recognized me. The years had done their work, and I moved among the people like a shadow that chose where to land. But shame is a storyteller that doesn't need your permission to publish. Eamon's brother told his wife. The wife told the market. The market told the town crier inside everyone's chest. My aunt sent word. It had spread. She added, "You are not there to hear it. Be grateful for small mercies." I decided to shrink. Became a girl who counted her breaths, who measured the market by the distance between questions. My mother taught me how to make oak pear that pulls at the tongue just enough, how to slice vegetables so thin they turn to ribbon, how to keep my face calm while my name traveled on mouths. My father, whose shame was a forest animal he had kept on a rope for years, sat in the evenings and whittled a stick thinner and thinner until his anger could see through it. 9 months passed like women walking to the farm, slow, steady, back straight. One afternoon, when the sun was resting on people's backs like debt, a young man stepped in front of me on the path. "I am Aaron," he said, and I moved past him, as if he were the part of a story I had outgrown. He tried again on another day. I put my no in his hands and watched him drop it gently. The third time, he did not ask for my name. He said, "I know." The air became smaller. "I know about Obodu. I know about Aman. I know what they said." He said it softly, the way you speak to a wound that thinks it is a face. My feet wanted to run, but my curiosity was a stubborn child tugging at my wrapper. "How?" I asked. He told a short story, how he had seen me once in another town and swallowed the seeing, how he had come back to find me married and lost, how gossip is an obedient horse. I took him home, not inside, just to the low cement bench by our compound's hibiscus, where the flowers make a red that can heal a sore eye. He sat like a man who had brought his own chair. He said, "I did not come to judge. I came to sit." He said, "You are not your story's villain. You are its drum." He reached for my hand and I took it back. Not because the hand was wrong, but because my body remembered the sharpness of surprise. He did not flinch. "If you let me," he said, "I will learn your map instead of trying to redraw it. Sometimes truth arrives, and your body mistakes it for a fever." I ran inside, closed the door, and cried until salt lost its meaning. For a week he came and sat with my parents under the breadfruit tree, speaking of work and rent and rain. My mother tested his words like yam in hot oil, listening for the right sound. My father watched his hands, how they rested, whether they trembled only when they should. On the 8th day, he knocked on my door and said, "If you will open, I will not rush in." I opened. We spoke long, and our silence spoke longer. When he asked to marry me, I did not know whether to laugh or to kneel. He had uncles but no parents. Grief had graduated him into adulthood early. We married softly, the way grief and gratitude get married inside the same chest. No fanfare. My aunt came and hugged me the way good armor feels. Close, warm, flexible. My mother wiped her face and said, "When God ties a knot, people's teeth cannot loosen it." My father's blessing was the longest thing he had said to me, since the midwife's hands trembled. We left for the city where Aaron lived, a place where the air hummed with engines and ambition, where the night wears generate a perfume, where the market calls you my size, as if that were your Christian name. In the city, anonymity is a kind of cloth you can buy on any corner. Aaron took my hand and led me not to a prophet, but to a hospital. "Let us know with knowledge," he said. The doctor wore kindness like a second stethoscope. Tests were done. Terms I had only heard whispered behind doors were explained in rooms with open windows. "Your womb looks fine," the doctor said one day, sunlight making his lenses blink. "You have a rare condition, but you are, in function and in spirit, a woman." The doctor spoke of options, of surgeries with their own biographies, of risks folded inside hope. "You can choose," he said, and I breathed like someone who had been holding her breath since a lantern watched me being named. Choice is a door you open slowly when your life has been a corridor with doors nailed shut. I chose to leave the surgeon's table for another day. If I can carry life as I am, I told Aaron in the taxi, let me carry my own life first. He nodded, eyes on the rain-streaked window, like it held the minutes we had just lived. We waited a year, not because the calendar demanded it, but because healing does not answer to clocks. We built small habits. A market woman who knew my name but not my story. A neighbor whose baby learned my voice, as if I were a second mother. A savings tin that sang when we shook it. Nights when Aaron's hands found me and asked without taking. We learned the deep housework of marriage. How to apologize without rewriting history. How to touch with the humility of pilgrims. How to argue for our us instead of for personal trophies. When my period missed 2 cycles, and then a third, my body remembered fear before it remembered joy. The test kit turned into a sunrise while still in my hand. I laughed and cried, the way rain laughs against a tin roof. Oren held me and said nothing because sometimes words make the miracle feel smaller. We carried the pregnancy like a bowl full of oil across a courtyard. Steady, eyes ahead, step sure. The hospital became a second neighborhood. The sonographer drew a shape on a grainy screen and said, head, spine. See? I cried the way my mother cries in church when the drum rolls into the chorus. My aunt traveled to us with a bag of herbs and stories, with a wrapper that smelled like palm kernel oil and home. My father sent money folded so small it looked like 2 coins in a leaf, his apology written in currency and quiet. My mother called every evening to tell me what the sky over Ikuru looked like, and I learned to measure distance by weather. Labor is a river with rocks. It took its time. I walked and prayed and cursed softly and asked angels to bend low. Aaron's hand became a rope. The midwife's voice became a drum. When the baby swam into air, a cry split the room and stitched it back again. The midwife placed a small furious man on my chest, skin slick and warm and certain. I counted fingers and toes, like the first mathematics I had ever loved. Aaron blessed him with his forehead before he said a word. My aunt ululated so hard the ward laughed, then ululated with her. Nurses, strangers, one old woman who had come for dressing. I looked at my son and felt my body forgive itself for the first time. Motherhood is the longest road and the shortest minute. The night smell of milk and new sweat. The days taste like ripe pawpaw and exhaustion. I sang my son awake in the mornings and sang my fear to sleep at night. When I bathed, the mirror finally learned my language. I wore wrappers that made my hips look like harvest, tied my headscarves the way women who have survived learned to tie them, with beauty and defiance. I walked past men who once would have turned me into a story, and now they only saw a woman carrying tomatoes. And tomorrow, my son learned to laugh at shadows, to babble to lizards on the fence, to fall and rise and fall again as if the ground were his older brother. I dedicated him in church and did not flinch when hands were laid on us, because I knew the secret that carried me to that altar was no longer a chain, but a story I chose to keep or to give. Sometimes, at dusk, I sit by the window, watch a booja float by, hawkers calling pure water, taxis arguing with pedestrians, evening smoke drawing thin letters in the air. Aaron brings me roasted corn, breaks it in half, gives me the bigger piece, and I remember the girl who once sat very still so the world wouldn't see her breathe. I owe that girl my voice, so I say it plainly now. I have lived with a body that made people rearrange their mouths. I have loved with a body that made a good man stand and a weak man flee. I have carried a child, carried shame, carried hope, carried my mother's stubbornness and my aunt's wisdom. I have learned that a secret can be a shield until it becomes a prison, and then love must become the key. When I lie with Aaron, we do not make ghosts. We make tomorrow. When I speak to my son, I give him a world where bodies are not crimes. When I walk to the market, I choose ripe things without fear of who is looking. And when night comes, if the old ache returns like an uninvited visitor, I light a candle, let the flame tremble, and remember the midwife's first gasp, my father's vow to call me by the name God gave, my mother's insistence that water washes what it can and leaves what is holy, my aunt's hands turning me toward a life I could bear. I breathe. I bless the child I was. I bless the woman I became. I bless the map that finally makes sense inside my skin. When the moon shrank to a thin fingernail and harmattan sanded the city to bone, my son learned the word light. He pointed at the bulb, at the window, at the morning money changes of the sky, and said it like a promise. Light. Each time something inside me unclenched, something I hadn't named, because fear likes to be nameless. I had given birth to a boy who could summon day just by pointing. I kept thinking, maybe he came to teach me how to point at my own life and call it bright, but even light trips on stones. There were nights the milk didn't let down, and he cried as if he had swallowed thunder. Nights my body sat up in the dark and swam through thoughts so heavy they had their own weight. I learned the soft grammar of postnatal sorrow, how it doesn't shout, how it sits beside you like a relative who refuses to go home. Aaron knew without me telling. He took the baby for a walk at 3 a.m., came back with plantain chips I didn't eat, told me jokes he had no business remembering. Some mornings I woke angry at the sun for being so faithful. Other mornings I washed the floor with such fury the tiles looked like they were pleading. And then, just as quietly as it arrived, the sadness thinned, torn by laughter, pierced by the first time my son clapped without falling. Soothed by a hymn, my aunt taught me that lifts the roof of the chest. When I lay me down by water, carry me, O peace, work found me in a way that made sense. The market women liked that I counted change twice. Honest hand, Mama Zainab said, slapping my shoulder with the affection of a person who has adopted you without paperwork. Soon I was keeping books for 3 stalls. Yam, tomatoes, fabric, teaching the girls who bagged pepper how to write neat numbers, showing them how every naira can learn to march in a straight line. Some afternoons, after the heat had bullied us into silence, I gathered them under a patched umbrella. I told the small truths a woman needs, that a body is a house and not a market, that love without witness is safer, that shame is bad fertilizer, that a secret should serve you until it doesn't, and then you should serve yourself. They nodded, some with eyes far away, some with lip-biting seriousness, some with the boredom of the unbruised. I said it anyway. When the day ends, a woman must be able to count the parts of herself that came home. News moves like wind through raffia. One evening, as I sifted beans, a whisper reached me that a man had come to the city to open a new shop. The name slid through my blood like a rusted blade. I hadn't rehearsed what I would do if we met. Throw words like stones, or make silence heavier than a sermon. I told myself I was done with yesterday. But life is a tricky storyteller. The next week, on a Saturday swollen with errands, I turned a corner at Wu's market, and there he was, bargaining over a bale of second-hand shirts, fingers dancing the dance of men who believe price must bow to their will. He saw me before I could decide to be invisible. For a moment, 2 pasts stood in the aisle between us. He opened his mouth to call me by a name only last year remembered. Chin. The way he said it had less salt than before. I felt my back straighten, not in pride, but in remembering I had a spine. Good afternoon, I said, the way you say it to a neighbor who does not know your door. His eyes fell to my hands, searching for a ring, a clue, a confession. My son tugged my wrapper, and I bent to lift him. When I rose, Eamon's face had that crumpled look of a man learning the weather does not care for his plans. Congratulations, he muttered. the word shaped like an apology that had not learned manners. I nodded, already moving away, but something made me stop. Maybe it was the thought of the younger me, standing in a dark room, trying to breathe under a bright bulb. Maybe it was the way my son leaned his head into my neck. A small warm comma at the end of my sentence. I turned back. "You spoke my body into a wound," I said, low enough for God to hear, loud enough for me. I stitched it myself. "If you ever speak it again, let it be as a miracle you did not understand." His mouth opened, closed. "I was afraid," he said, and the truth of it made him smaller. "I was taught that fear is a god," I answered. "I have learned it is only a rumor." I left him there with shirts that smelled of other people's journeys. My chest shook. I bit the inside of my cheek until it hurt. And then, as if the city itself had decided to baptize me, rain came. Fat, insistent, shameless. My son squealed. I laughed, and we ran. Two bodies that were no longer on trial. Later, I told Aaron. He listened as if the story were a river, and he was afraid to splash. "Do you want me to talk to him?" he asked. I loved him for asking, and loved him more for accepting my no. That night, we ate jollof that burned so sweet it almost sang, and turned off our phones and lay in the dark, naming the blessings we hadn't begged for. The neighbor's generator dying early, the baby sleeping, the smell of new rain on dust, the way our hands found each other without searching. My father called after months of sending only folded money and terse texts. "Bring the child," he said, voice disguising its gladness as anger. We traveled to Ukuru, under a sky that kept changing its mind. Sun, shade, sun, shade. My mother had tied a fresh wrapper and rearranged her cheeks into a smile that made the air taste like cold water from a clay pot. She took my son from me with the audacity of grandmothers and showed him the compound as if she had built it. My father watched from his carved chair, the sort of chair that remembers the weight of a man's decisions. I knelt because old habits can be prayers too. He cleared his throat like an engine grumbling awake. "I could not save you from people," he said, "because I was trying to save myself from their eyes." He looked up as if the sky were the witness he needed. "Forgive me. I built our house too small for your truth." I put my head on his knee and let the years loosen. He smelled of snuff and soap. He blessed my son with words that walked from his chest to his mouth without limping. "Be water where fire insists. Be fire where cold pretends to be law. Carry your mother's stubborn mercy, your father's delayed courage." My mother ululated from a room away, as if she had been waiting for this sound all her life. That evening, the village women arrived with gifts. Groundnut paste, cloth, stories. Somebody said, "Your child has your eyes." And I thought, no, he has my future. We went to the stream at first light, the one that curves like a question mark through the palm, the one that taught my childhood how to be a mirror. I tied my wrapper high and stepped into the water, my son on my hip, my mother and aunt on either side. 3 generations making a small defiant bridge. The cold grabbed my calves and then softened. I scooped handfuls and let them fall on my son's feet, then on my own. "For the roads we will walk," I said. I poured some on my head. "For the thoughts that must be new." I didn't ask the water to wash away anything. Not anymore. I asked it to shine everything that insisted on remaining. We returned to Abuja, because cities keep time for you when you can't be trusted with clocks. Life did what it does, rushed, and then strolled, and then sat on a stool. My son learned to run with his eyes closed and faith wide open. He asked questions that were doors. "Mummy, why does the sky wear blue?" "Because God loves rappers," I answered, and he looked satisfied. I wrote my name on forms. School admission, clinic registration, cooperative membership, and each time my hand did not tremble. I bought a small glass cabinet and filled it with soap and pads, and the quiet things women need, but are taught to whisper about. The girls from the umbrella meetings came to buy, to sit, to breathe. Sometimes older women came too, the ones who carry their past like a sleeping child, heavy, precious, hard to put down. We learned together how to name what hurt without setting it on fire again. We saved money together, the tin growing heavy, our laughter growing louder. We sent Halima back to school, helped Joy leave a man who mistook her body for a complaint desk, held Selma when her brother called her future a debt. Every little victory felt like a drum beat, added to a song only we could hear. One night, when the power cut itself into pieces and the street was lit by candles and curses, I lay awake and placed one hand on my son's back, one on my belly, where my history used to tighten like a fist. Aaron breathed like a man who had negotiated a fair deal with sleep. A gecko clucked on the wall. A tricycle whined by. Somewhere, a couple was laughing and didn't care who heard. I thought of the midwife's hands again, and how the first thing they told about me was a gasp. For years I made that gasp my surname. Now in the dark, I gave myself a new one. I whispered it to the ceiling, to the gecko, to the future leaning at the window. Beloved. In the morning, I tied my scarf and went out with my son to buy a curra. The woman at the stall dipped her hand into oil and pulled out golden circles that pretended they had never been beans. Fine boy, she said to my child. Fine mother, she said to me, and it did not feel like a lie. A girl from our group walked by, eyes bright. Auntie, I did it, she blurted, a certificate peeking from her bag, like a secret that couldn't keep itself. I hugged her tight enough to make the certificate crease. On the way home, a neighbor asked if I could speak to her cousin. She is carrying something too heavy and calling it silence. I said yes, because yes had brought me here. At sunset, my aunt called from Obodu. I dreamed we were all eating together, she said. Yam sweet like apology, stew hot like gossip denied. I promised to visit, she said. Bring the child so I can show him how a woman becomes a road and a roof. After the call, Aaron took my hand to the balcony. The sky was doing that orange to bruise thing I love. He pointed, like our sun, to the first star and said, "See, evening has forgiven today." I leaned into him, into us. People below argued about football and transport fares. Amy Wezin's call braided itself into hymn and generator hum. And for a long good moment, all the maps I had ever carried lay flat, whole, readable, mine.